Drawing from Observation, Lesson 4 Gesture, Construction, and Sight Measuring. Before starting this lesson, please have the following materials ready: paper, sketch pad, drawing supplies, ebony pencil, subject matter, 5 bottles or jars of various shapes and sizes, and other similar objects. Keep track of those assignments. Do each exercise in order in your sketchpad. Change pages for each exercise and use as many pages as you need, but on each page, write your name and the number of the exercise, for example, O-4A. Also, after doing the assignments, remember to take photos, both of your drawings and of the subjects you drew. In the last lesson, doing gesture drawings, you often discovered shapes as you scanned objects, individually and in groups. Now we'll introduce 2 techniques for drawing shapes: construction drawing and sight measuring. Exercise O-4A, gesture drawing warm ups. Time 5 minutes. Materials ebony pencil and sketch pad. Subject bottles. To warm up, let's return to gesture drawing. Set up 4 or 5 bottles or jars with various shapes and sizes and draw each one separately, working quickly and freely, letting your eye roam around the shape while letting your hand follow your eye. Spend a minute or 2 at the most on each object, then go on to the next. As you start, keep your eye on the bottle most of the time, but after about 30 seconds, glance down at the paper to compare the drawing with the object, checking length, width, and shape. Notice how long the neck is compared to the body, how the neck joins the body at the shoulders, how wide the bottom of the bottle is compared to higher up, etc. Make corrections without erasing in the same gestural style. Okay, start. and stop. Exercise O-4B, bottles in groups. Time, 2 exercises at 5 minutes each, so 10 minutes. Materials, ebony pencil and sketch pad. Subject, group of bottles. The next exercises apply gestural technique to bottles in a group. So place two next to each other and draw them together rather than one at a time. Look for a general shape between them, a triangle or square they fit in. When you're not staring at a particular object, the eye naturally seeks such shape relationships between objects. Drawing also helps the connective process if you let lines flow between elements. Once you've got the arrangement, continue to draw individual bottles, correcting them as you did before, while going back and forth from one to the other so they both develop more or less equally. As you do, check the bottle's placement in relation to each other, again correcting mistakes gesturally without erasing. Okay, start. and stop. For the next drawing, add another bottle, laying it on the table pointing at you or away from you. Then draw the grouping without worrying about three-dimensional effects like the bottle on its side. Just concentrate on the shapes you see of the group, the individual bottles, and the negative space between them. But remember, this isn't an outline drawing. From the start, draw gesturally, even when making corrections. Okay, start. and stop. If you did this exercise right, you might have surprised yourself at how easy it was to draw a group of bottles so they looked convincingly shaped, proportional to each other, and connected in space. This might be because you were using your eyes in the way they function normally, scanning and making connections. Another reason why it might have been easy to draw this way is that the eye tends to naturally look for shapes of objects and shapes between objects. Think of the constellations and how we find objects, people, and animals in what are actually random groupings of stars. Shape, as an element of art, also comes in a variety of, well, shapes and sizes. There are regular geometric shapes, like circles and squares, etc., non standard rectilinear and curvilinear shapes, and organic shapes, like those found in nature. These can be highly irregular, like jellyfish, or more geometric, like crop circles. The next exercise looks directly for shapes in the process of drawing. In some ways, it may seem just the opposite of gesture drawing, where you're supposed to draw spontaneously with no particular idea in mind, just following your eye. Here, you start with a plan to draw shapes and try to find them in the objects. Also, gesture drawing involves looking holistically, whether at individual objects or groups of objects, while this exercise involves breaking objects down into separate parts. It's called construction drawing because after you break things down, you build them up again. Like gesture drawing, which might remind you of scribbling, construction drawing is probably a familiar technique. If you've ever followed a how to drawing lesson, how to draw a horse, a dragon, Mickey Mouse, it was probably a construction drawing technique, drawing simple geometric shapes like circles, ovals, squares, rectangles, triangles, etc. While it seems simple enough for a child to do, like gesture drawing, construction drawing can be done at the most sophisticated levels. But even seemingly simple objects can prove challenging using the construction technique. Let's try it on bottles and see how it can help you draw them more accurately and appreciate their qualities. Exercise O 4C Construction Drawing. Time 2 drawings at 5 minutes each or 10 minutes. Materials ebony pencil, sketch pad. Subject bottles. Take two of your simpler bottles, no curvy lines or unusual angles or complicated patterns. Ordinary bottles can be difficult enough. Now look at one of them and try to see it as if it were carved into its component parts. Usually, the body of the bottle is shaped like a vertical rectangle, fairly wide, while the neck looks like a narrower vertical rectangle. Of course, these forms are really cylinders, but we're not worried about three-dimensional form, at least not yet. For now, just look for shapes that can be measured. Next, look at the shoulder of the bottle. Maybe it looks like part of a circle or oval, or maybe a triangle with subtle curves. Draw each bottle, breaking it down into similar component parts. Spend about 5 minutes on each bottle, taking the time to look at it carefully before you draw to get the basic measures of each part in relation to itself and in relation to others. Compare, for example, the body's height versus its width. Notice if its sides are straight up verticals or if they slant in or out. Do the same for the neck and the lip of the bottle. Maybe you'll notice that even simple bottles have subtleties of shape and proportion that aren't obvious until you draw them. Note that although you're drawing shapes and measuring, construction drawing should be done fairly loosely, not as random as gesture drawing, but not as controlled as outline or contour either. Keep your hand and arm loose and draw lightly at first, blocking everything in. Then go over each shape a few more times if it needs to be corrected or refined. Here, too, don't erase, just make corrections a bit darker. Okay, start. and stop. Now do the second bottle, but remember what you learned from the first one. Observe more carefully and measure each part in relation to the whole and in relation to the other parts. Okay, start. And stop. Did you notice any progress between your first construction drawing and the second? If not, don't worry, you'll soon improve as you learn to look at things in this analytic way. Like gesture, construction drawing can be applied not only to simple objects, but subjects of great complexity, like buildings, people, even landscapes. Let's try the exercise again, this time on a more complicated group of bottles. Exercise O-4D, construction drawing of group. Time, 10 minutes. Materials, ebony pencil and sketch pad. Subject matter, 5 bottles. To increase the challenge and show you the benefits of construction drawing, let's put all the bottles together into a composition. Try to make the arrangement interesting by placing some bottles straight up, others on their sides, some close together, others further apart. First, sketch the whole arrangement, looking for a simple geometric or organic shape to tie the whole group together. Then break this overall shape into 2 or 3 smaller sections, still not going after the individual bottles. Check the proportions of these groups to one another and to the whole. Then quickly block in individual bottles. Initially, focus on their general proportions before looking at their individual shapes. Continue to draw, correcting their shapes and proportions, still working relatively freely. Towards the end, if you have time, go back over the drawing with a contour line to refine shapes and add details. Okay, start. And stop. Construction drawing takes the intuitive measuring you did in gesture drawing a bit further. Looking at objects as geometric shapes makes it easier to compare the height and width of one part of an object to another and of one object to another, but you can still make mistakes. The next exercise will introduce a technique to make comparisons like this even more likely to be accurate. It's a trick of the artist's trade called sight measuring. You can watch this animation to see how it's done. Taking a flower in a vase as the object to be drawn, the artist takes a pencil in hand. First, he holds the pencil as shown to help him keep it straight up, not tilted forward or back. Then he extends his arm until his elbow is locked, so his hand is held literally at arm's length. Now he holds the pencil up so it's right in front of the object and closes one eye to not confuse his sight with binocular vision. Next, he takes the measurement of the vase by holding the pencil so the tip appears to line up with the top of the vase and places his thumb to line up with the bottom. This measurement is then compared to the flower. Coincidentally, the vase is the same size here as the flower, but it could be larger or smaller. Finally, the artist turns his hand sideways to measure the width of the flower compared to its height. To get the width, he moves his thumb closer towards the tip and sees that the width of the flower is about 2/3 of its length. Now let's apply this technique to another two-part object, a lamp with its lampshade. Exercise O-4E, two-part object, lamp. Time, 15 minutes. Materials, ebony pencil and sketch pad. Subject matter, lamp with shade. Choose a lamp, a decorative lamp like this one, a reading lamp, or a floor lamp. If you don't have a lamp, use another two-part object. Follow the steps you just watched. First, hold the pencil straight up, not letting it tilt forward or backwards. Then extend your arm until your elbow is locked. Now, hold the pencil up so it's right in front of the object and close one eye. Next, put the tip of the pencil up so it aligns with the top of one part of the lamp. It doesn't matter whether you measure the lamp first or the lampshade. Now, move your thumb up the pencil until it lines up with the bottom of that same section. Next, holding your arm as steady as you can, keeping your thumb in place and keeping one eye closed, move the pencil to measure the height of the next part to get a comparison between the one you measured first. Then compare the width of each shape to its height. Keep those proportions in mind as you prepare to draw. Begin with a simple construction drawing, lightly sketching in the whole shape of the lamp or other object. Then break it down into two secondary shapes you just measured, trying to keep the proportions of the parts accurate based on the measures you just took. Note that these are not the same measurements you took on your pencil. Instead, they are proportional relationships. For example, 1 to 1, 1 to 1.5, 2 to 1, etc. Before going on with your drawing, check your measurements again using the sight measuring technique and make any corrections necessary. Depending on how long you draw, you can continue making measurements of smaller and smaller parts. Normally, however, once basic measurements are accurately drawn, smaller shapes just fall into place. Keep drawing and checking in this way until time runs out. Okay, start. and stop. In this lesson, you were introduced to a technique used by artists since the Renaissance to help them accurately translate three-dimensional subjects and spaces onto two-dimensional surfaces. If this is the first time you use this method, it might have felt a bit confusing. If so, don't worry. You'll eventually get more comfortable with it as we use it on future assignments. Also, some people find sight measuring too mechanical and prefer to work more spontaneously and intuitively. In that case, don't let it tie you into knots. It doesn't always have to be used as rigorously as we just used it. Often, artists will take just a few quick measurements, then start drawing freely. Alternatively, they might start out sketching, then take some measurements to correct what they initially laid out. However, you use sight measuring, it will eventually help you to see more accurately and to draw what you see more convincingly. Before you quit for the day, check that each page of drawings is labeled with your name and the number of the exercise. And be sure you've taken photos of each page of drawings and of the subjects for each assignment.